Hello, everybody, and welcome to Sake Revolution. This is America's premier sake podcast, and I am one of your hosts, John Puma. You may know me from the Sake Notes. You may also know me as the guy who runs the internet Sake Discord, and furthermore, also the guy who runs the Reddit r/Sake community.
That's a lot of running, John.
It's a lot of running. You would think I'd be in better shape, Tim.
And I'm your host, Timothy Sullivan. I'm a sake samurai, I'm a sake educator, and I'm also the founder of the Urban Sake website. And every week, John and I will be here tasting and chatting about all things sake and doing our best to make it fun and easy to understand. Yes, John, you're running around in circles for sake, aren't you?
Trying to get the word out, Tim. I'm using technology to do it. So I got Reddit, I've got Discord, just trying to give people places to chat about sake. I think that's the way forward, at least with my personal talents. That's what I can do.
You're doing the Lord's work with technology. I love it.
Somebody's work. I don't know yet. So it's good to see you again.
Yeah.
It's been a little bit. We had all these episodes backlogged from when we were in Virginia, and now we're recording in Zoom. I don't want to say in person, but in Zoom again.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll let me tell you something. The vibe's a little bit different. It was kind of interesting to just look across the table and you're right there.
I know.
It was fun.
We've been recording on Zoom for years, and then in one day, we were together for like 5 episodes across the table. It was quite a shock to my system.
Yeah. And the fact that we're still doing the show, you haven't gotten sick of me yet. I'm very impressed.
Yeah. All right. Well, what are we going to talk about today? I think we have another fun topic.
We are going back to one of our series. This is the series where we talk about different sake vessels.
We've done a lot of these. How many vessels are left?
This might be like the longest running. Now, it's probably the Prefectures that has been the longest running or has the most episodes. But this is probably a strong number 2. And in my mind, so it's like the sake vessel series, but in my mind, it's kind of become the can you beat the wine glass challenge?
Yes, can you beat the wine glass challenge?
So far, the wine glass is undefeated in my mind. Every time we do one of these, I feel like the wine glass gives me a bigger expression of the sake or a more full expression of the sake. But, I love that we're exploring these. I'm getting to try some I have never had before. I'm getting to try some I've only had in restaurants. And I'm learning a lot about where these things came from. Because I drank sake out of plenty of times, but I didn't really know the story. And when you do a podcast with a sake educator, you get educated is what happens.
Yes. Well, you may not choose the vessels that we talk about. You may not choose them for your everyday drinking, but you're going to come across them in restaurants and different situations. And I think it's important to be educated as to why a restaurant might choose a vessel other than a wine glass for given styles of sake.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That makes sense.
And they're historical and interesting. So it's all around good stuff for me to try these different vessels.
So I have a vessel in front of me that we've discussed.
Yes.
And I need to know, what is this thing?
Well, we've talked about a whole bunch of different vessels so far. And the most common vessel you're going to come across in Japan is what we call the ochoko, right?
Yes, for sure.
Ochoko is a small ceramic cup, usually about 2 to 3 ounces. It's really small. And it's usually ceramic, smooth-sided, and it's meant for, just one little sip of sake, basically. And it's meant to be refilled, and that gets people at the table talking. But that doesn't always fill the bill.
No, it doesn't.
Sometimes you want a little less formality and a little more fun times, right?
So taking the express route.
Yes. So enter the Guinomi.
Guinomi.
Right. Yes. So the primary thing that separates an ochoko standard cup from a guinomi is the size. So guinomi is going to be larger, hold more sake per pour.
All right. So how much more sake?
I would say if an ochoko on average is 2 to 3 ounces, a guinomi would be a little bit more than double that.
Whoa.
Yeah.
It's a turbo ochoko.
It's a turbo ochoko. It's an ochoko on steroids is what we're talking about here. Yeah. So there's a few characteristics that, again, there's no legal definitions for any of these things.
Right,
but
right.
when you say guinomi, the impression is that it's going to be a little bit bigger.
Mm-hmm.
And in my mind, they have an impression of being like rough hewn or not delicate. So it's a larger cup meant for drinking sake. And they often have like a texture to them. They're often made of like a rustic ceramic or earthenware. And they're really fun to drink out of because they hold a little bit more volume.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think I've definitely had really small ochokos that generally, sometimes they get paired with small carafes and they'll kind of pour them around the table a little bit. And the expectation, because the carafe isn't huge, is that you're just going to have kind of a small tasting. And as you pointed out earlier, it's like, kind of a social thing. You're going to, because if you keep the pouring happening, you're probably chatting while you're doing it. And so, having these and just being like an alternative vessel to put a bunch of sake in, that sounds like a lot of fun. Now, in these cases, is this, in your experience, something that they would pour from a bottle directly into your guinomi, or is this something that there's still going to be like a carafe along the way?
It can be both. It's not considered exceptionally polite to pour directly from a bottle into a sake cup. So usually they use a carafe of some kind. Normally in Japan, you would buy the sake by the go. So a go is 180 milliliters. You can get a carafe that's 1 go, carafe that's 2 goes or 3 goes. So normally you order by the go or the 180 ml, and then they'll bring an appropriate size carafe to your table, and then you would pour from that. It's not considered exceptionally elegant to pour from a large bottle into a small, whether it's guinomi or ochoko. So normally at a restaurant setting, in Japan, you're going to be having a carafe of some kind.
Oh, okay.
Now there's something really fun about guinomi that I want to tell you, John. So guinomi actually contains an onomatopoeia. Now an onomatopoeia is a word that represents a sound.
Right.
Right? And there's an onomatopoeia in guinomi. It's the gui.
Gui.
So let me excuse me while I make a noise here. See if you recognize this. Gui, 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 gui.
Ah, it's like the pouring of the drink. And nomi, I imagine, is drink.
Nomi means drinking, right?
So nomi means drinking. So go drink.
It's glug. It's in English we say glug. Like
right.
Glug, 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 glug.
Okay.
So gui,
all right. I think I see where we're going with this.
So it's like drinking, gulping. Drinking is what it means, like gulping down sake. So it's a glass for gulping.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
No. But I think the reason that the guinomi or the gulping cups are a little less refined is because that's not meant as the most elegant way to consume sake. Like gulping down your sake is doesn't give you the impression of like refined elegance. It's a little bit more rustic. So I think the cups kind of reflect that in their style.
Okay. I could see that. That makes sense. Because they are, as you pointed out, they usually have a little more of not going to have as much of a finish on them.
Right.
I kind of like that.
Yeah. Ochokos are often smooth-sided and, like glazed, and they have this like very smooth edges to them. And guinomi are more like rough-hewn and rustic. So, John, you have a guinomi at home, don't you?
I do, actually.
All right. Well, we'll put a picture of it in the show notes, but why don't you describe it for our listeners?
Sure. So it's going to be interesting to describe this. So it's made of clay, and it definitely has the feel of a cup that was spun and then was slowly kind of formed on the sides, because there's ridges the entire way around, so you can actually trace the rings, the circles going all the way from the top of the cup to the bottom of the cup. and it is very like porous feeling. Like it is porous, maybe the wrong word, but you know how like when you're touching a piece of clay and it has that I like when you said the word rustic earlier, it has that feel to it. It's grippy. It's, you know, it feels a little bit, a little rough and tumble.
So it's something that you feel was thrown on a potter's wheel and kind of shaped. And then
for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Is it glazed? Like, glaze is like melted glass on the outside of, like when you glaze something and you heat it, it's literally like this layer of glass on the outside of some ceramics. But does it feel like rough? Like it doesn't have a glaze on it? Or
no, mine feels
smooth?
rough. It feels very rough.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. There's nothing, they're not standing on ceremony here. There's nothing fancy about this cup. It's just, okay. It is just a nice cup to drink sake out of.
Yeah. Yeah. And what color is it?
It's like brown or brown or gray.
It's like a brown,
almost. Yeah, brown, gray.
Earthenware brown kind of color.
Yeah.
Yep. Great. So yeah, these are cups that are meant for larger volume, less elegance, less ceremony. Mm-hmm. And I think they're really good to know about.
Yeah. So the funny thing is you mentioned this to me. You're like, oh, I want to do an episode on Guinomi. And I was like, great. What's that? And then you asked me if I had any cup. You like described it to me. And I was like, I do actually. And I went through my cupboards and I found it. And, actually it came in a set of 2. My sister got them for me years ago.
Yeah.
And I'm glad I have them because I was like, oh, this is perfect timing.
Perfect timing. Deploy the Guinomi.
Yes, absolutely. So, and I assume that you've got a few. So,
yes.
Yeah. So why don't you talk a little bit about yours?
Yeah, I have one. This is also kind of an earthenware one, and it has a hammered texture on the outside.
Yeah, so that's interesting.
Yeah, so it was definitely made with this emphasizing. It's not just like it was rough clay and they just kind of roughly smoothed it. They went the extra mile and they created a hammered texture on the outside of mine. Yeah. And I would say this holds a good 5-6 ounces in it. So it's much larger. Yeah. And there's a fine line between like a small teacup and a guinomi. So sometimes I've seen like things that could pass for a teacup being used as a guinomi as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see that. I can see that kind of getting those borders muddied a little bit. Yours also seems to be pretty glazed on the inside, a little shiny.
Yeah, it has a little glaze on the inside, but it's rustic on the outside. It's a very unique one, but it's heavy and it has thick walls and it has all the characteristics of a guinomi.
Yeah, it is. Mine is also is quite, for its size, is quite heavy.
Yeah. I want to take one moment to talk about a topic that I know very little about.
Oh, I love it. This is what I do every week on the show.
Which is high-end, super expensive Japanese artisan ceramics.
Ooh.
If you're not steeped in the ways of high-end ceramics, you may not appreciate the beauty of it. Mm-hmm. And I've had a limited exposure to the world of high-end Japanese vessels that also are sold in a market that is equivalent to fine art. Mm-hmm. So they're viewed as sculptural objects in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. I know very little about it, but the only thing I wanted to interject here is that there are guinomi made by famous artists and sculptors that sell for boku bucks. That's all I know. Mm. So you can Google it, look for them. Maybe I'll put one in the show notes, but ours do not fall into that category.
No, they don't. Now, so what you're trying to tell me then, Tim, is that you're not in the market for artisanal, multi-$1,000 fine art guinomi.
I'm in the market.
Your vibe.
I'm in the market. My bank account is not in the market, but I'm in the market.
Noted. So if you come across free or inexpensive artisan, you're not just going to flip it. You're going to keep it.
Definitely going to keep it.
All right. So if anybody over there has anything, yes. Tim's a buyer.
I'm a buyer. A potential buyer.
His price is right.
So I just think it's interesting to note that there's this huge market in ceramics that I know nothing about, but they are prized and treasured and museum pieces in Japan. And I just think that's an interesting side journey on this talk about vessels. I don't think we can talk about Guinomi without mentioning that there's a fine art branch to this as well that is just unbelievable. So that's a whole other podcast.
We'll need to have somebody from Sotheby's on with us for that one.
Yes, for sure. And I think I would feel different if I knew I was holding a $300,000 Guinomi. My hand might shake a little bit. You would? My hand might shake a little bit. I would be nervous about dropping it. So
yeah, I think I would just kind of look at it and go, "Oh, okay," and then just take a step away. I don't want to be anywhere near it. I'm not going to have a bag on my back near it.
You love a good backpack, John Puma.
I do, but not with a several $100,000 piece of porcelain in front of me. I definitely do not.
If we have any listeners who are experts in fine art ceramics from Japan, please send us some high-end Guinomi to sample.
There you go.
Would love it.
So Tim, I'm hoping that you brought some sake today for us to sip out of this Guinomi.
Yes. So I put my thinking cap on, and I knew we were talking about this rustic yet elegant style of sake cup, Guinomi. And I thought, what type of sake would be good for this? And I was thinking definitely a junmai. And then a brand popped into my mind, Sogen. And we featured them on the podcast before in a very early episode when I talked about, do you remember my story when I talked about going to Ishikawa and I got on the bus and I took it to the end of the island and got off and there was nobody around and I was lost? Yes. Well, this is that brewery I visited at the end of the Noto Peninsula in Ishikawa. Very rural. And I thought that this elegant yet just a touch rustic junmai might be a really good fit for our Guinomi. So, John, do you want to introduce us to the sake we're going to taste today in a little more detail? Sure.
That sounds like a fun time. And before I do, let me tell you that Ishikawa does make me think of like for some reason, just like rustic sake vessels. So I think you might have nailed it here. This is good. So yes, as Tim mentioned, this is Sogen from Sogen Shuzo over in Ishikawa. This is their Noto no Kuni. And this is using Yamada Nishiki rice, milled down to 65% of its original size. The sake meter value that measured from dry to sweet is a +4. Acidity is 1.3. The yeast variety is Association number 14 yeast, so Kyokai 14. And I don't know if I've ever had the sake before, so this is exciting for me.
Yeah, it's called Noto no Kuni, which I think means Noto country. So Noto, again, is the rural peninsula, and it's very much a area of fishing vessels, rustic, windblown, and inhabited with a lot of hardened fishermen. So it is an area that's known for being like on the outskirts, and they make a very elegant sake, very flavorful, super balanced usually. So we've got our sake, and we're going to pour it into our Guinomi and our wine glass.
Yeah. So every time we try this, we try these vessels in our typical wine glass and then with the vessel of the week. And the idea is to see what each of those vessels brings out of the sake and how it differs from how we normally experience it. And for Tim and I, we normally experience it from the wine glass. All right, Tim, got it in the cup.
All right, so we've got this poured. So I think our tradition, John, is to drink from the vessel in question first.
Right. Even though I think technically in science, you're supposed to use the control first, but we're not doing science.
This is definitely not science.
This is much more art than science.
Yes. All right.
I
can smell it. Smells a little ricey. Nice steamed rice.
Yeah. Steamed rice. Not so much the sweet rice that we get sometimes. But this is just kind of, a little bit of rice.
All right. Let's give it a taste. Interesting. So
this pairs really well with the cup.
It does pair with the cup, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, I hurt my arm patting myself on the back here with this this selection. Sometimes, John, I have to say, when we've done vessel in the past, I feel like we might have picked a sake that wasn't an ideal match, kind of like, let's see what happens. But this one goes really well.
I agree with you. I think that this one is definitely nailing it. You talked about like the fishermen out in Ishikawa, and they're a little rough and tumble, and then they have some of this sake out of a gui-nomi, and I'm like, yep, that all tracks. Yep. Yeah, and I think that the aroma and the taste are very much in harmony. This is, that rice that you're getting on the nose is a rice that you're getting on the palate. Very, very rice forward. And that's interesting to me because when I think of Yamada Nishiki, I think of it as a rice that kind of gets out of the way and lets the yeast do its thing. And here, the rice is very much something we're getting a lot of experience with. That's interesting. What do you think about that?
I'm almost hesitant to call this a ricey sake because when I hear that, it triggers in my mind an idea like, oh, I might not like that if it's too earthy. If it's too rustic, I may not like it. But the thing that's different here is it brings the most elegant parts of the rice flavor forward. And there's also, for me, a little minerality. I don't know if it was all the talk of the ocean breezes from the Sea of Japan or whatever, Noto Peninsula, but there's a little hint of minerality there. And it is just the thing that makes a good sake for me. I'll say this again and again and again, is the balance they bring to it. And this has dryness. It has the ricey flavors. It has a little minerality. And
it's a little bit, it's a little spicy. Just a tiny bit. Like on the finish, I'm like, ooh, a little zing at the end. That might just be like a little alcohol burn also. Hard for me to discern at this point.
Yeah, you could say there's like if you think of like white pepper or something like that,
yes,
it may be just a little
exactly that
hint of spiciness.
That's
but
nice. It's
overall, and this is like a super food-friendly sake from a gui-nomi. Like, oh my gosh, so many things I'd love to pair with this.
Yeah, I think... I think this is a sake that can stand up to a whole host of like big foods. And I think this is a vessel that's going to go really well with a whole host of big foods. I think I'm just imagining like something grill. I'm having yakitori with this. And that's like my vision, I guess. Like I'm in like a rural izakaya and I'm having some skewers. I can see him roasting them. Right? I see him, on the flame in front of me. Like that's the vibe I'm getting from the sake.
The charcoal smoke coming off the grill.
Yes, definitely. I can practically smell it.
All right. Well, should we do our control now, Mr. Scientist?
I think yes, we should. We should.
So I've got the sogen in a wine glass, our usual wine glass.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So let's give this a smell. So it smells ricey, but
it still smells ricey, but the rice is a little bit sweeter. To me,
it smells marshmallowy a little bit. Like
all right, I'm with you.
Right? You're with me?
Yeah.
Yep. Dare I say, circus peanuts?
Not quite there. Not quite there. Not that far.
Yeah, but
I think that's circus peanuts is like marshmallow plus banana.
Yeah. This is a little more mochi rice.
Okay. Yes.
Now, which aroma did you enjoy more?
I mean, it's what's weird is that the aromas are, I hate to use the word completely different, but they're really different. And I feel like it's setting me up for a different taste. So I'm very curious how it's going to taste out of the wine glass, because out of the gui-nomi, they were like perfect together. The aroma and the flavor were absolutely in harmony.
Right.
Like there was that ricey nose. So I'm very curious to see what this is actually going to taste like when we have a sip.
The way I would describe it is the aroma is in a different gear.
Ooh, I like that.
It's like a lower gear out of the gui-nomi, and it feels like it's shifted to. It's this for me. It's obviously the same aroma, but it feels like it out of the wine glass. It gets kind of supercharged, or it's in a different gear than out of the gui-nomi. So let's give this a taste out of the wine glass and see what happens.
Yeah, I'm very curious to see what we're going to get out of this. It's lighter. That sweetness is present. I didn't get the sweetness, or very little of it, in the gui-nomi.
Yeah. one point I want to make, I just notice my own behavior. So the Guinomi is about 4 or 5 ounces, and the wine glass is huge in comparison. I feel with the wine glass, I took a larger sip out of the wine glass because it just deposits more on my palate. I think reflexively, I took a smaller sip out of the Guinomi, and it just landed a little differently on my palate. That's all I wanted to say.
No, I totally understand what you're
get it.
saying. I get it. Like, this is a smaller cup. You're going to take smaller sips. This is a regular size wine glass. You're going to take a wine sip. It's a larger amount. Now, do you want to go back, put a little bit more in the Guinomi, and have a larger sip and see what happens?
I've been doing that while you were talking.
Oh, well, all right.
No, I think that this has been a little eye-opening for me. I've always just reflexively reached for the wine glass when I want to enjoy sake at home. And now I'm thinking, like, why not a Guinomi and appreciate the sculptural aspect of it? You're not going to get as much aroma. It's like I said, downshifted aroma, but it's really enjoyable out of the Guinomi.
It is. And it's different and not, it's different and equally good in its own way. So I just did try to put more, I put more sake into my Guinomi, and I sipped it, tried to take a bigger sip out of it. But the way that the larger sip hits your palate from the Guinomi is different from the way it does on the wine glass. On the wine glass, it's kind of natural, and it just kind of flows to the width of your mouth. With this, you're kind of, you're not shooting it, but you're pressing more in where it doesn't want that. It wants to be a smaller sip. And it's just a different experience. And I think you're totally right. This is interesting. What's up?
I've read a lot of articles about how different vessels affect your impression of a sake, exactly what we're talking about now. And I've read some things about the angle of attack of the alcohol hitting your palate. And what I think is happening is that when you sip from the wine glass, more of the edge of the glass actually goes further on your lip, and it delivers more to your palate. Whereas the Guinomi, you just touch the edge of it to your lip, and you're not, I don't know, it's not delivering as much sake to your palate with one sip. That's my theory, at least, with this.
I think there's something to that. And I think that once before we had a situation where we felt that there was no winner. It was just different. And I feel like that's kind of what's going on here, is that the sake tasting experience from each of these is very different. But, they're both really good sake tasting experiences, and they're great. And I think that it might just be the vibe you're going for that day. Like, what do you want out of your sake that night? All right, well, if I want to have something with some something a little smoky, or with some nice grilled meats, well, it might be Guinomi time for this particular sake. If I'm just sitting on the couch and I'm sipping something, then maybe I'm going to put it in the wine glass. And this same sake is going to accomplish both of those goals. Yeah. I will not sip this on the couch out of the Guinomi, though. That'll be a little weird. It's not performing at its best for that scenario. Same idea if I had this in a wine glass or with the grilled meat, I'm going to be missing out on what I'd be getting out of the sake out of the Guinomi.
Yeah. It makes me think about all the many years of restaurant experiences I've had in Japan and in New York, and I was served a certain vessel. And as a consumer, I might not put too much thought into, why is this a Guinomi? Why is this an ochoko? Why is this a wine glass? Why is this a Beaujolais glass or whatever?
Right.
And you just enjoy it the way they serve it to you. But now I'm thinking like, maybe that restaurant chose that glass for that reason with this food. And it really takes it to a whole nother level. So,
yeah. And that is something that when I was first getting into sake, I was going to Sakagura sometimes in Midtown. And that is the first place I ever went where I would order sakes, and like, depending on what I ordered, they would give it to me in a different vessel. And I was always like, what's going on with this? I don't understand. Yeah. And this series has kind of helped me understand that a lot more.
Yeah. Yeah, Sakagura in Midtown here in New York, they are kind of the poster child for this treatment. They really pay attention to the type of sake, the profile of that sake, and what vessel is going to showcase that best. John, you and I can testify that not every restaurant goes to this level.
No, most don't.
Most don't. But they do a great job with that. And when you're at home, if you have these different vessels we've been profiling, it's really fun to experiment. And I think this is a classic example of how you can have such a different experience, same sake and just a different vessel.
Absolutely. This has been eye-opening for me as well. It's not something you usually get. It's nice.
Yeah, it's awesome. All right. Well, John, it's so great to taste with you. Nice to visit Sogen again. It's one of my favorite sakes. I think I told the story last time I discovered this at a sushi restaurant, and it's just been such a good standby sake. So I'm so glad to share it with you, John. And I also want to say a special thank you to all of our listeners for tuning in again this week. So great to be back with regular episodes, and also a special hello and thank you to all of our patrons. If you'd like to support Sake Revolution, a great way to do so is to visit patreon.com/Sake Revolution and sign up to be a member of our Patreon community.
And another way that you can support us is through leaving a review at your podcast platform of choice. They all got your ability to pop in there and just you can tell people what you think about Sake Revolution, and it's going to help other people find our show. You can give us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Chartable, wherever you're listening. Pop a review in there. It really helps get the word out about our show. Now, on that note, please raise your gui-nomi. Remember to keep drinking sake and kampai.